Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everybody Matters, our Family and Friends edition. I'm Jill Catherine, the host of our chat, and happy to be here this month to have a conversation with you all. We have our live chats every month, usually on the second Wednesday of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern. You're always welcome to join us live on the chat. If there's any questions you want to ask me, we're always happy to have you live. So what we aim to do with our family and friends chat here is to provide you with some insights to, just one second here. We have someone who's entered our chat, which is wonderful. Excellent. Great. Okay. Sorry, just managing my technology here. So as I was saying, what we aim to do on this chat is to provide you with some insights, with some information, and really with an insider lens onto some of the ways that we support people who are going through recovery as a way to give you sort of that insider look for your loved one. And, so as always, if you have thanks for joining our live chat. If you have any questions, feel free to put it on our chat here, right in the message bar here. You're welcome to ask any questions. If there's anything particularly you want me to address. What we aim to do in our chat, because all of our situations are different, right? What's going on with your loved one certainly is unique to your situation. So I can't speak to the specific needs of maybe what's going on for you, but I certainly can address it broadly. And so if there's any questions that, even if it is about your specific situation, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer it in a way that hopefully can help us from a broader lens, because certainly there are nuances to the situations of your loved ones that I don't want to be misleading or misdirecting in those natures. So what I can do is help speak to the heart of the matter, right? Some broader themes. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have on our chat, Eric, and if not, that's okay too. You can just listen. So a couple things that I wanted to talk to you all about this month was 3 things that are very common with those who struggle with an eating disorder, disordered eating, negative body image. These are 3 things that we often talk about in the online support group that I do for people in recovery. These are 3 constant themes that come up over and over again. So as you guys all know, I love to share this stuff with you and take what resonates with you, leave the rest, okay? So take what resonates for your particular situation. Even if you don't think it resonates and you're not sure how it relates, I encourage you just to make a note about it, put it in the back of your mind, because most of the time you'll see it at some point. It will connect at some point. So one of the things that is most challenging for people in recovery and who struggle with this disease is setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is a really difficult thing for us to do. And I think setting boundaries can be a hard thing for all humans to do. Some of us can do it more easily than others. But particularly with those who are in recovery, setting boundaries can be really difficult. Why? Because our natures tend to be pleasing. We're trying to and we try to meet other people's expectations, right? Those 2 components make it really difficult to set boundaries. Because if we're trying to meet other people's expectations, we're trying to please you, how can we then go and set our boundaries? And setting boundaries is critical for us in recovery. So, for example, your loved one, it could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be a sibling, it could be a friend, but particularly in parent-child dynamics and partner to partner dynamics, it can get really difficult around setting boundaries, because a lot of the times we're trying to meet your expectations. But if what's essential in recovery is for those in recovery is to be able to identify what their needs are, really to connect with what they're feeling. That is the quintessential component of their recovery process, to be able to identify their own personal needs, their own personal feelings. Because a lot of the times there's a facade, and what we're really doing is just trying to meet the needs of everybody else. And that can work for a really long time until it doesn't. And that's why a lot of times in recovery, romantic relationships can be challenged, because those that could really work for the partner, and then when the person is needing to really attend to their own personal needs and start to set some boundaries, the partner, it's difficult to adjust to that. And in parental relationships, it is so common for parents to set an expectation for our kids to live up to. And it could be a reasonable expectation. And I think that the challenge here is when we set expectations for someone else that is based on outcomes, like actionable outcomes. I expect you to do X, Y, and Z, can be a really slippery slope. And that's different than having an expectation that your loved one, an expectation of a certain value. And because that's where we really want to get to, is, are you setting an expectation? Are you demanding an expectation of a value or of an outcome? Because values is something we can work with, because they allow all of us then to express ourselves in our own unique way. So if there's an expectation of that's values-based in your relationship or in your family or in your friendship, that's the key. Because then everyone then can be in agreement to that value and then still be their unique self. Okay, so in a family unit, if you have values that's based on respect and integrity and kindness, let's say, then you can hold each other accountable to those values based on people's actions. And if it's values based, then your loved one is free to then express themselves, who they are. And whether or not it meets that value is where you can have the conversation. In a romantic relationship, our values are based on honesty, trust, whatever. But when we're setting value, and when we're setting expectations that are based on someone having to do something, you have to meet this, goal, achieve this, act like this, do this, is very challenging for other people. Because why? Because we, all our own selves, you can have an expectation of your loved one that isn't what they want for themselves. If it's an outcome based, it could be, I have an expectation that you go to, you're involved in this sport, or you go to this university, right? Or that you have a career in this field. We see this all the time. And this is just real difficult, challenges and family dynamics, as we have these expectations for our kids. But what if your kid, that doesn't resonate at all? It doesn't feel like at all who they are. So they're not going to meet that expectation. They're going to try to meet that expectation. And in the meantime, they're losing their sense of who they are, who their self is, and what their personal needs are, what their basic needs are, what their emotional needs are. And if we don't think that's a value or that's important, then we wouldn't have to be on this call, because that's how we get to where we get. That's how we get to having this disorder of some aspect of this spectrum, is that there's a big disconnection from being able to be in touch, your loved one, for be in touch of what their personal emotions, needs, wants, and desires are, and then feeling that it's safe for them to express that. So this whole internal self is what's, in crisis, is discombobulated. And to help your loved one, for them to heal this, if they're trying to still meet the expectations that others have from them, in some ways is in direct conflict with what they need to do to recover. And I don't say it's easy or, uncomplicated in terms of family dynamics and in relationships, but it's just what's real. So this is why, growth has to happen. This is why families really, it's messy. This is why this becomes messy. But messy doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean bad. It's just being real. And so this other aspect of needing to please, we see that often as a really good characteristic in someone, that someone who's thoughtful and they always want to do for others and make other people happy. And it's a really admirable trait that someone could have. And it makes somebody very likable too. For those with that trait, and this is, again, the common things that come up in our groups for those in recovery, is that constant need to please other people has profoundly affected their ability to understand what they actually need, right? Because they're trying to make everybody happy. So they don't even know what makes them happy. And the danger of always making people happy is at some point you get to that point of you don't even know what makes you happy, and you're lost. You feel disconnected. You feel like you don't know who you are. And in that disconnection, you start to numb, right? It's about everybody else. And at some point, it doesn't work anymore. At some point, something snaps. For with this disease, at some point it could be that you try to please so much, that you try to be perfect so much to where you break. You can't live up to your own demand anymore. The pressure, the stress, right, is not sustainable. Is to constantly be in a state of trying to make everybody happy. So that's a huge growing edge for people in recovery, is learning how to disappoint people, because how to not just be operating from a place of trying to please you, how to operate from a place of setting boundaries and saying no, mom or dad or boyfriend or girlfriend or partner, whoever, that's not what I want. That doesn't feel right to me. I'd like to do something different. How to set that boundary is an extremely difficult thing to do. And we had, someone a couple weeks ago really in some challenges with her parents, and this happens all the time. We hear this all the time from people struggling with disease that will say, my parents just don't get it, or my partner just doesn't get it, and they just don't get it. And first off, I don't think you can get it, right? I don't think anyone can get it unless you've gone through it, right? And I think that's an unrealistic expectation to expect parents to get it and partners to get it. But what they're really trying to say is that we're saying you don't get it, right? But what we're really trying to say is that we just want support. We want you to understand that we don't need you to actually have to get it to be able to give us support. And by giving us support is giving us the space to figure this out for ourselves, to heal, to grow, to change. And more often than not, what we find in our recovery groups is that the challenge that people are having is, as they're, working through their recovery and their healing and their growing, they're getting tremendous resistance from their loved ones, right? And their loved ones are saying, we don't understand you. We don't, you used to be like this and now you're like this. And, that whole thing of comparison, you used to be like this and now you're like this. It becomes a major stress, right, for those in recovery. So I don't say that thinking it's easy for you to see someone you've known and been with or nurtured to start to be different. But one of the things we always talk about in recovery is for change to happen, if people wanted for change to happen, like they don't want to keep living in this disease, right? They don't want to be in these behaviors. They want to change, right? They want it to be different. So for change to happen, they have to let things be different. They have to be different. Because you can't want something to change and not have things be different. It's impossible. So one of the mantras that we have is letting things be different. Letting things be different. Let yourself be different. Let your relationships be different. Let how you manage those relationships be different. So that's crucial, right? Is things have to be different. And most people don't like change. Right? We want change, but then when it happens, we kind of don't like it. So, as always, we've had chats on this before about growth, your own growth that can happen in this, and your loved one's growth. I think really what it comes down to is your willingness to let it be different, to your loved one to be different. Because that's what's gonna have to happen, and that difference is just gonna be different. They're gonna communicate differently. They're gonna act differently. They're gonna they're gonna communicate differently. They're gonna act differently. They're gonna think differently. So if you can keep the mindset, if you can adopt the mantra, I'm gonna let things be different. It's just a little self-care. It's a little trick, a little tool, to let things be different. And so that's when we have that mindset, we're not gripping so hard to the past, to what was and what our expectations were. And you might, I can think about my parents, for example, when I was going through my recovery. My parents had no intention and no desire to wanting things to be different. They were happy with how things were. And you could be that way too. Like, you could be happy with how things were. How things were in your family. You could be really happy with how things were in your relationship. But this person who has struggled with this disease, who's part of the family or part of the relationship, wasn't well. It isn't happy, and isn't in a well state for them. And so they're going to things have to be different for them in order to recover. And by the nature, of physics, if that person's in your family, your relationship, them being different is going to affect the dynamics of anything. So the point is, it's happening whether you like it or not. And it's much more painful trying to hold on to things when we're trying to resist life than go with where it's going, And so adopting that mindset of letting things be different can not only really support your loved one, but it can be less painful for you. And full circling this, bringing it back to, is if you're able to articulate values, right? Values that are what you want to make the thread of your family or your relationship is values based and not outcomes based. And I know I don't mean this dismissively or disrespectful, particularly to parents, right, who have a lot of expectations. But again, setting boundaries is really critical in a person's recovery, is to be able to say, no, that's not what I want. For them to be able to manage your expectations that's based on values and not what they actually, as actual, to-dos. And for us to work on our own need to please, to make everybody happy. If we have to then start to say, okay, what makes me happy and what makes me happy might not make you happy, I still have to be able to tell you what I need and what's my purpose, even if it's going to really disappoint you. That takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. And why do you think people stay in this disease? It's hard to confront someone you love, a parent or a loved one, and set a boundary and say, no, I actually want to take this path, and this is what I believe in. That's really difficult to do. So if you focus your unit on values that you can mutually respect, and then allow everyone to be who they are in connection to those values, can really help to support the recovery process. So if you could even have that conversation with your loved one, saying how you're there for them, and it's saying to them, you might not understand the details of this, but you do understand that they're going to have to change, and that you're going to do your best to be willing to support things being different, and supporting them being different. I mean, that's huge. That's groundbreaking. I can't even tell you, if you're able to hold that type of space, is incredibly healing. Incredibly. And something we've learned about this disease over time is the more support people have, real support. I'm saying people to be able to talk to their loved ones like this is instrumental in their ability to recover, feeling like they really have true support. So, letting things be different. Are you able to let things be different, and supporting them to let things be different? Be mindful of the expectations you're setting and putting on your loved one, and try to make them values-based, and take it one day at a time. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next month.